In the name of Christ, who is with us.
Amen.
Last week, we were in a particular time and place, a stinky stable crowded by cows and unwashed shepherds, looking for the divine in a trough of hay. Today, we stretch our minds across the infinity of the cosmos, looking for the inarticulate word spoken before creation began, to become flesh and to be found dwelling within us. Well, that's the difference between John and Luke. There is in Seattle a Pastor Marquardt at Grace Lutheran Church who has a way of personifying each of the gospel writers as reporters of the good news, each with a different audience. One reporter is a Jewish rabbi businessman who publishes the story of Jesus in New York City's Jewish Daily Forward, Matthew. The second reporter is a fisherman from Ballard who tells the other fisherman what he heard about Jesus, Mark. The third reporter is a doctor-turned-TV reporter who broadcasts the story through CNN World News to the worldwide community, Luke. And the fourth reporter is a university professor who teaches philosophy at the University of Chicago, who blogs his observations to students and professors at colleges and universities around the globe. John. Now, since I am in fact an alumna of the University of Chicago, I can assure you that what he is saying is that John is the most philosophical, heady intellectual of the four Gospelers. I was a real anomaly at the Graduate Library School since I was not particularly interested in teaching or working in an academic library or even at a lucrative corporate information center. No, from the start, I knew I wanted to be a mere public librarian. Excuse me. John is using the cutting-edge vocabulary of his contemporary Greek philosophers. When he says the word, he is not talking about language, but logos, the root of our word logic, meaning something closer to intelligence or the mind of God, the pattern or source or meaning of life. I think that a fundamental aspect of our humanity is storytelling. In Viktor Frankl's words, man's search for meaning. Storytelling is a way we can imitate the divine, creating meaning that illumines the darkness. This time of year, people in northern latitudes huddle around campfires or the light of digital screens, hoping stories will keep away many kinds of darkness: fear, depression, boredom, ignorance, gloom. I'd like to tell you a story. It's a story I found, a true story about light and darkness, written by a Dutchman, Willem Brandt. And he starts out this story talking about how this story took place long ago, 50 years ago, and far away in a humble, stable-like shack. But we know another Christmas story that took place longer ago. Moon lived in that excuse me. People lived in that shack. Though living is a slight exaggeration, they were put away there. Outside was the barbed wire on which the sun and moon flashed little sparks wherever it had not grown rusty in the course of the years. Yes, it had been years, or had it been centuries? You didn't know offhand. You were too tired, too ill, too weak, even to think about following the hours and the days. You had in the beginning, but that had stopped long ago. You were confronted more with eternity than days or hours. For so many died, beside you and all around you, from hunger, dysentery, and other tropical diseases, or just because they didn't want to live any longer. Their last spark of hope had been extinguished. We tried to hang on even a little, even so, in that concentration camp. Why, you really didn't know. You long ago had given up believing in the end of the war, in liberation. You lived on out of a kind of routine, in a stupor, numb, and with only one passion left that now and then jumped at your throat like a wild animal, eating whatever it was. But there was nothing there. We were systematically starved. Once in a while, someone would catch a snake or some other creature, perhaps a rat. Just forget that. Nobody who survived this cares to talk about it. There was one man in that camp who still possessed something edible. It was a candle, a plain wax candle. Of course, he hadn't originally taken along or saved it in order to eat it. A normal human being does not eat tallow, although they say the Cossacks used to love it. In any case, it is fat, and that you do not underestimate when you see only emaciated skeletons around you, in whom you also recognize yourself. Whenever he couldn't stand the torture of hunger any longer, he would take out the candle, which he kept well hidden in a beat-up little suitcase, and nibble on it. But he didn't eat it. He considered it his final hope of salvation. Sometime when everyone else would be mad with hunger, and that would not be too far away now, someday he would eat that candle. I hope you don't think this strange or gruesome. I, who was his companion, thought it very normal at the time. In fact, he had promised me a small piece of the candle. It became my task in life, my constant care, to see that he did not, in the end, eat that candle all by himself. I watched intently, and even spied on him in his little suitcase day and night, having to fulfill such an important task, perhaps kept me alive. Well, one day we learned it was Christmas. Somebody had accidentally discovered this, after long calculations with the help of small lines and notches in a beam. He told us all, and then added in a rather flat and expressionless tone, "Next Christmas we'll be home." We nodded, or didn't react at all. We had heard that for several years now. Still, there were a few who clung to the thought, for you never know. It was a very strange thing to say. It was like a weak, scarcely audible sound from an immense distance, something utterly unreal out of a deep, deep past. Then someone said, perhaps with no special intent, or perhaps with some, I never did find out, "At Christmas, candles burn and bells ring." I must confess the remark passed most of us unnoticed. It was of no concern to us. It spoke of something so completely outside of our existence, and yet it had the most amazing and unexpected results. When it was late in the evening, and everybody was just lying there on the boards with his own thoughts, or actually without any thoughts at all, my friend became restless. He edged over to his little suitcase, and he got out the candle. I could see it very well in the dark, that white candle. He's eating it, I thought. If only he remembers me now. And I peered at him through my eyelids. He put the candle on his board and then disappeared outside, where a small fire was smoldering. He returned with a burning stick of wood, a sliver. Like a ghost, that little flame wandered through the shack until it reached its place close to me. Then this strange thing happened. My friend took that piece of wood, that fire, and lit his candle. The candle stood on his board and burned. I do not know how everyone discovered it so immediately, but it was not long before one shadow after another edged closer, half-naked men on whom you could count the ribs with hollow cheeks and feverish hunger eyes. Silently, they formed a circle around the burning candle. One by one, they came closer, those naked men. Also the minister and the priest. You couldn't see that that was what they were, as they too were as emaciated as we, but we happened to know. The priest said in a hoarse voice, "It is Christmas. The light shineth in the darkness." And then the minister added, "And the darkness comprehended it not." This, if I am correct, is from the Gospel according to John. You can find it in the Bible. But that night, around this candle, it was not a written word of centuries ago. It was a living reality. A message for this hour and for us, for each one of us. For the light was shining in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. At the time, you didn't reason it out, but that was what we felt, silent, around that Christmas light, that white candle, that pointed flame. There was something extraordinary about it. That candle was whiter and slimmer than I ever have seen since. And that flame, it was a flame that reached to the sky, in which we saw things that are not of this world. I will never be able to tell about it. None of us will, who is still alive. That was a secret between the Christ child and ourselves. For at that time we were certain that it existed, that it lived among us and for us. We sang silently, we prayed without a word. Yes, I am certain about this, and I have at least 100 witnesses, though most of them cannot speak any longer. They are not here now, but that does not mean they would not know anymore. Yonder, deep in the swamps and jungle, thin, angelic voices sang Christmas songs for us, and the bronze of 1,000 bells resounded. Where this all came from also remains a secret. That candle burned higher and higher, its flame growing more and more pointed until it reached the ridgepole of that high dark shack and then went right through it up to the stars, and everything became white with light. So much light no one has ever seen since. And we felt ourselves free and lifted up and did not know hunger anymore. That candle had fed not only my friend and me, that candle had nourished and strengthened all of us. There was no end to the light. And when someone said softly, "Next Christmas home," we believed it this time unconditionally. For the light itself had brought us that message. It was written in fiery letters in that Christmas flame. Whether you want to believe me or not, I saw it. I know it myself. I saw it. The candle kept burning all through the night. There was no candle in the whole world that can burn so long and so high. When morning came, there were a few who sang something that had not happened in years. That candle saved the lives of many of us. We then knew it was worthwhile to go on, that somewhere at the end, for each one of us, home was waiting. And that was indeed the case. Some returned home to Holland before the next Christmas. They think the candles on our Christmas trees are small, much, much too small. They have seen a larger light that is still burning. Most of the others went home also before the next Christmas. I myself helped lay them down in the earth behind our camp in a dry spot between the swamps. But when they died, their eyes were less dull than before. That was the light of that strange candle, the light that the darkness had not comprehended. Since I lost my mother this year, there has been a dark side to this Christmas season for me. I've caught myself thinking about calling her, wondering about gifts she might like, noticing the changes in our usual routines. The time I have with my family is more precious. The news that has filled our papers, airwaves, and bandwidths of late is more fearful. She had been especially close to a cousin who had been imprisoned in a Nazi concentration camp. Like Willem Brandt, he shared stories of that unspeakable time only with her. Mom fought other kinds of darkness: depression, being disowned, divorce, disease. We often said Mom was at her best in a crisis. And at the end of her life, she found a forgiving nature, a patience, a saintliness we hadn't seen in her before. Each of us confronts our own darkness, but the light of Christ shines everywhere. I enjoy reading many different translations of the Bible, but today the King James Version says it the best for me. The light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it